Hello, everybody. It is Irrational Radio here with Table 13. We've got a special guest, G, from our server. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you for
Great.
having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for being here. So you've got your own project going on other than just being on our server. Yeah,
Yep.
you're known other places as well. But we know you best as G from the server. But so tell us a little bit about your own personal stream and what you're working on.
So I've got a couple of things that I do. The big one that I'm working on that is still it hasn't seen the light of day yet, but it's Pew Pew Anonymous. What it is I'm working on trying to build a nonprofit for veterans, military veterans who find the therapeutic outlet of role playing to help offset PTSD and other issues that they need that veteran camaraderie to deal with.
I think that's a really noble cause.
Yeah, and I mean that's I've got several friends I played with growing up that were either army brats or in the service themselves, and so I feel like that's a pretty good track to go down for that. Is maybe a great place to reach people who are otherwise stuck together and not in a ton of I don't know, depending on where you are stuck or where your base is or whatever, like that kind of stuff, I suppose. I don't know. That's like a really noble cause. That's a great way to
Yeah.
use D&D or any sort of role playing game. That's
Is
awesome.
Yeah.
so in your opinion, is role playing is there a large role playing culture in the military, or is it smaller than other, I guess, cultures in the military, or like hobby cultures in the military?
So it's larger than a lot of people, I don't know, want to admit.
Okay.
That there's a stigma around role playing games. And, being in the military, you often don't want that stigma attached to
Right.
you. However, a lot of people I knew when I was in um, were either into it or wanted to get into it.
Okay.
And a lot of my friends that have been in the service since I've been out were into it and knew people that wanted to get into it. So it's bigger than, like I said, it's bigger than a lot of people want to admit. Um, but I think that's a good thing because it's such a way to be creatively, well, this is a horrible way to word this, but I think you'll understand.
Sure.
It's a way to be creatively violent without having that violent outburst to have to deal with.
No, I completely understand that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
like a safe way to blow off steam or something like that. I
Right.
think Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So eventually, what I want to do is get a bunch of veteran military veterans who are able to run games for groups of military vets. Um, Eventually, I hope that that's going to grow into um, something that is bigger than just veterans and have it something that, well, have it outgrow the ability to just hold veterans.
Oh, that's interesting. And that way you can like help integrate veterans that might not have a social outlet into a larger social like pool of people that might not be in the military themselves and like kind of
Yep.
share those experiences a little bit.
Yep.
Um,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
I was also contacted at one point about a year ago by a guy who runs um, it was like a veteran outreach. Um, I can't remember what it's called. And what it's called doesn't matter. But it
Sure.
was basically a veteran outreach for his community. And he was like, wow, this is a great idea. I want to be involved. Let me know when it goes live. Because he had a
That's
bunch of
awesome.
people in his like VA hall that wanted to do something like that.
Interesting. Um,
So
and it does sound kind of like this would be catering to more towards veterans rather than people that are actively in the service. But I mean, it doesn't sound like you'd like limit it to obviously being just veterans. But um, is it? Do you find it easier, like more people as veterans have time to role play more than active duty? Because I know that in the military schedules can be very hectic and change at a moment's notice. So is it harder to be in games when you're in the military or versus being a veteran or like what is your opinion on that?
I don't know how the schedules of current active duty military work right now.
Right.
I mean, it, I got out in '99,
Okay.
so it's been a few years. But when I was in, I mean, it was most of the military had fairly set schedules if
Okay.
you weren't deployed or training in the field. What that is now, I don't know.
Okay. All right.
Um, for for what I'm aiming towards, it is more the people that have left the military because they no longer have that support tree of other military to lean on.
Okay.
So I'm trying to offer them that group of other people that have been through, something similar to what you've been through that they no longer have.
Right.
And in a non stressful environment where they have an opportunity to relieve that stress.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
I think that
that is what Pew Pew Anonymous is aiming to become.
that's great. I think that that's a very clear and easy to understand goal, and it's got such a great like reason behind it. I suppose I love the idea of role playing existing as a form of therapy for people who have had difficult things. I mean, military or otherwise. Honestly, I mean, I've seen people kind of grow as people through role playing because they're able to be in situations or experience things in a way that's almost like a safe space, for lack of a better
Right.
term. But it's more like you're not going to be judged in the same way you would be if you were yourself doing these things or
Right.
and if your DM is good enough, you're able to kind of experience sort of catharsis that you wouldn't experience if you were playing something like a video game where
Exactly.
all the lines are set. Someone has been here before to write this code. But in role playing, you're after a 6 hour session, you're in the weeds. No one knew this was going to happen. No one
Yep.
predicted this, and
Yep.
it forces you to kind of think in a way that other ways of relaxing and being social don't demand. Um, so in terms of like the actual like therapy of role playing, do you have any personal anecdotes that you'd like to share about like that kind of the healing power of role playing, or any kind of or maybe even suggestions for how people are best to get a therapeutic experience out of role playing?
I mean, it's so individualized. I was lucky in that I I had a lot of friends when I got out that I could lean on,
Hmm.
and role playing wasn't really something that we used for that camaraderie.
Right.
Um, but for me, role playing was always something that it was something that I always had from when I was young growing up. And I found it so enjoyable. I want to share that with others. And I I have found in talking with other veterans that they enjoy it to the point of finding it cathartic.
Right.
So, me personally, no, other than I have helped others in that. But
Okay. All right. And do you have any idea as to what makes one group more cathartic than another group, or again, is it just really like kind of a personal thing where you gotta kind of go out and do the work yourself to find the game or the group or the DM that's going to provide that kind of cathartic feeling for you?
I mean, different people find different games enjoyable. I mean, some people enjoy D&D, some people enjoy Star Wars.
Hmm.
You know, it's going to depend on what the individual is looking for, and then finding people to run that kind of game that's going to be the biggest challenge, I think.
Okay. All right. So I guess kind of going off that a little bit, you personally, what's your favorite kind of game? Is it one where you're running the game or taking part as a role player? And if so, what kind of experience do you like to have in each of those roles?
um I like running games
Okay.
because I like knowing the world, and when the players put themselves into situations into the world, knowing how the world is going to react to them.
Okay.
Um, Currently, I've got a Stars Without Numbers game going that has been going for over 2 years.
Solid
Um,
game.
Yeah.
it's challenging. This is one of the beginnings of the Pew Pew Anonymous idea, as it were, too. The For the Stars Without Numbers game, they started out on one planet, and I have since basically mapped out 3 different sectors
Okay.
around the planet. So I know what's going on in the universe. And oh my God, that's challenging.
Yeah. But it's really rewarding. I mean, I honestly,
Right.
that's my favorite part about being a DM is like what you're saying, having that system held kind of aloft in your brain and having the secure knowledge that if a role player opens the right door, you're going to be like, "Oh, let me show you this thing that's making a lot of this stuff work back here. I'm so glad you opened this door." But if they never
Yeah,
do, you're still able to use that to show other things and put other doors in front of them.
exactly. Yeah.
So,
And the other side, I think it's really fun. For me, it's similar. I really do like that about DMing, but it's more the focus for me is less about showing the stuff that I've developed, but like finding the spots where I don't know what's going to happen, but there is like a coherent system that dictates, okay, this is a reasonable response given, XYZ of the sets of circumstances that they did go in on. It's like knowing those base parts because you
Yeah.
have a coherent enough system, you can kind of work from there and say, okay, I don't have to totally pull this out of my ass. There's like a reasonable set of responses that people would already, but whatever, building that logically consistent system is, I love that about being a DM too. That's super
Yeah.
fun.
Is that your longest game that you've ever run, or have you run longer games? I know that you've been in the role playing, community for longer than I have been alive. So, I'm
Yes,
interested to know
it's
about the history that you've had with campaigns and successes and failures.
yeah, this is definitely the longest campaign that I have both run or just been involved with in general.
Okay.
Um, I've had a lot of games start and end within a few sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the the next longest one that I had, it was a World of Darkness game that technically it's still it could continue. It's just on
Okay.
hiatus
Sure. Sure.
because one of the players, his wife had a baby.
That'll get you.
That'll do it. Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, that lasted, I want to say about a year, give or take.
Okay.
But yeah, most games, 6 months to a year
Okay.
is pretty much average. So this is the longest I've had a game go, and it is the most enjoyment I've ever had.
Oh,
That's
that's
awesome.
awesome. Yeah.
Is that
Is
do you feel like you spent more time with internet D&D? Is that like, or is that a trend you've know, like the 6 months, is that something that's specific to the internet age of tabletop, or does that go back preceding that, sort of internet stuff?
Well, yeah, this is I I think that's one of the both blessings and curses of the internet games. Um, it definitely allows for a wider um, group of available players, which can make a definitely an interesting player base. Um, but the the scheduling around players can be even more hectic.
oh yeah.
Definitely.
So
You got to juggle time zones and stuff in with all the rest of it. It's, yeah,
Yep.
definitely.
yeah, exactly. So, um, but I mean, it's it it's definitely opened up the hobby to a wider range of people.
Absolutely,
So,
yeah. I think that's definitely the case, and it makes it ton like you can play with somebody who's in California if you're in on the East Coast or something, which wasn't even an option
Yeah.
2015, 20 years ago. But
yeah,
so that's
I
kind of
mean,
cool. But
So
or people that work night shift being able to play with people in Britain.
yeah.
right, sure,
Yep.
yeah.
I've seen that before too. So I like in terms of campaign length and success, along with kind of the online versus in-person differences, what are other differences that you've seen between games that don't last very long and these longer games or this longer game that you've had? And how can people, if someone's like interested, if they're like, like, gee, how do I get a 2-year game? What I've never had one. All my campaigns have lasted a month tops. What is the secret to your long form game? What would you tell that person?
Dumb luck.
Yeah, right. That's
Probably way more involved than than anybody wants to admit. Yeah.
I mean, having an interesting story,
Hmm.
having interesting characters, having interesting players. I mean, it's just the combination is the, having.
Struggling.
I guess the biggest thing is having people that enjoy either the story you're telling or the environment that their characters are in, so that the story becomes interesting.
Okay.
So you got to get them to buy in.
Yeah.
And then once they're kind of invested, this is very similar to what my opinions on the matter. So I totally agree. Yeah, if you can get them in on the first 2-3 sessions, and if they're creating a character that builds in and things along those lines, then I think it's a lot easier to get the game past that like 3rd to 5th session hump where a lot of games can sort of peter out. I think if they're gonna end early, that's sort of that line, which I think usually, and I think that's where it is too. It's a lot of times if you can get the ball rolling, it'll keep itself, the momentum itself of the game sort of keeps it rolling.
My problem with this long game is I didn't actually have party coherency until session 11, I want to say.
Wow. Okay.
When you say party coherency, I guess?
So you know how a lot of GMs start their game. All right, you're in a tavern.
Oh, wow.
You all know each other. What do?
It took you 11 sessions to get the group together.
So
Ooh.
2 of my players' characters knew each other.
Okay.
The other 2 players' characters knew each other. These 2 parties didn't know each other.
Okay.
It took 11 sessions for these 2 parties to actually start working together.
Wow. That's crazy.
Oh man.
Yeah, that was a challenge.
My longest game I have going right now, it was like 3 sessions or so, and everybody was running around independently at this festival before they were all together. 11 is a lot.
11 is a lot. Yeah.
I think it was the first or second session where one of the 2 guys bombed the bar where they were meeting.
Well, it's not a
Makes
great
things
way
complicated.
to make friends. Yes.
No,
Antagonistic after that, usually.
A little bit. Yeah.
Well, then you got one group who's like, "Oh man, those people just set the bomb." If they know anything about it at all, they're like, "Oh, they're bad guys."
Yep. So Goose does ask an interesting question up there. How did you manage to hold their interest between 2 groups?
So we were all in a Zoom call together.
Okay.
And so it was basically just back and forth between the groups. I'd spend 5-10 minutes talking with these 2 guys, and then all right, so now 5-10 minutes talking with these 2 guys, and back and forth.
Wow. For 11 sessions.
Yeah.
Jeez. Wow. Yeah. That's awesome. I think that
it's on YouTube.
You have earned the right to that 2-year-long campaign after
Absolutely.
that. I mean, if they weren't, down for being in the adventure, the work that you put in order to get them to their characters to see the same story the same way is it like kind of shows them that you're in for the long haul. I think which holds their attention as well.
Well, and then you don't ever have anybody saying, "Wait, why are we working together again?" If it took you 10 plus sessions to get them to...
Oh, really?
Okay. Well,
Well,
It
you know.
insulates you maybe from some of those concerns rather than the just we started in a tavern or whatever.
Right.
But
One of the players is a psychic who had a vision when they were unconscious, and they are the only person who has had the vision. The rest of the party has no idea what's going on with this guy.
Oh my goodness.
just crazy, yeah,
Yeah.
no idea. Oh, that's fun.
So, within role playing itself, what are some of your highlights or lowlights, I guess you could say too, or like very nadir moments where it's just like the worst slog in the world? Because every veteran of role playing has that story where it's like, oh my goodness, uh,
I wish I hadn't done this.
yeah, exactly, or that was amazing. I can't believe that all went together that well.
Well, I mean, that is kind of the pinnacle of the slog. There's later in that same group. Um, got so many stories from that group.
2.5, yeah, 2 years and change. That'll
Yeah.
do it. Yeah.
So at one point, the group had hijacked a starship and they were trying to escape a planet that was harvesting cobalt. Um, they decided to engage the interstellar drive while still in orbit.
Uh-oh.
Um, I There's a paragraph about this big in the rule book that explains, emergency escape when in, yeah. Um, it's easy to overlook those little rules.
Right?
I went ahead and just said, you engage the Starship Drive in a planet that's harvesting cobalt. You just blew up a planet.
Nice.
Yep.
That has had repercussions.
As it should.
One of the players. So it's a 2d6 skill system.
Okay.
On 2d6, the guy rolled a 15 to add his name to the VIP list to get into a club.
That's a high roll on 2D6.
All right, so you basically just reach around the guy, add your name, and yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious.
No, I swear, I just checked the
Look,
list.
look,
Oh,
check
wait.
the list again. Yeah, no.
Sometimes you
it's
just
right
gotta,
there.
do some dumb shit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah.
Let
Dumb
them be
shits
heroes,
all the
Exactly,
time. Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
The, the rule of cool often overrides what the rules actually say.
Yes.
So
I think that's a
That's
pretty
fun.
good rule of
That's a
thumb
good
to
one.
go by. Yeah, absolutely.
this D&D game that I'm actually a player in, I'm playing a half-orc wizard, which, that's just a broken character as it
Yeah,
is.
right.
But I also play him with a terrible Scottish accent. But I had taken the spell Catapult,
Good spell.
and it is a good spell. We had been attacked by these oozes. Now, technically, an ooze is an animate thing, and it's not subject to the catapult spell. But you know what? When you launch an ooze into another ooze, that's just too cool. My GM allowed it.
That's good. What
That's a
about
fun one.
so in your long history of role playing, what is the most frustrating or worst campaign you've ever been in? And you don't have to don't name names or anything like that because they might watch this video later. But yeah, do you have any horror stories that you'd like to share?
Oh, yeah. Um,
That's the response I was hoping.
Oh,
so
well, boy.
early D&D back in
Hmm.
the 80s. My friend who had introduced me to the hobby decided to do a campaign where we could basically be anything we wanted.
Yep.
Anything. And I came up with this just dumb character. It was like a centaur were thing. I'm not sure if it was like a vampire or a werebat, or it was just dumb. And I think that campaign lasted 2 sessions, and it was just, this is dumb. We're done.
Yep. Yep.
Overly epic starts. Yeah, I remember similar kind of game where we were in. It was 3.5, I think, where we were just like, yeah, grab whatever crazy character with whatever crazy level adjustment. That stuff tends to not go super well.
Yeah.
I did have a guy with a floating head, though. I remember that. That was fun.
Yeah. I played in a campaign like that, and I was an alien with an open sinus cavity. There was just a hole in his head, and I had a deathly fear of the color purple. Like I would take damage if I saw purple. So it was a goofy
Clever.
campaign. Yeah, same thing. I made, like, it was in high school back in the early days of my role playing, and those campaigns I think are really something that every hardcore hobbyist in the thing has to kind of go through. It's just like, wait, what if? Well, this is fun. What if I let everyone do anything they want to, and I'll just run a campaign like that? And you do find that you need some kind of borders on creativity to actually bring about true creativity. If
Yeah.
people are just trying to out weird each other, you're not going to get a very cohesive narrative that actually brings about moments organically, and you're like actually invested in the story if you're an 18-foot tall metal hairy beast wielding a flaming great axe right at the beginning.
That sounds like Fooly Cooly, actually. So,
Yeah, well,
I don't know.
So I guess, like, kind of going along that line too, as you've had a ton of experience in different systems. I mean, even if you just stayed with D&D from the 80s to now, that's 3 systems, right? Four editions. Um,
Um, so, so I started with AD&D,
okay.
and then we moved to, what was it? The 3.0,
Okay.
and then 3.5. And then let's see, I got into Rifts, TMNT, Savage World, World of Darkness, which to include Vampire, Mage, Changeling, Wraith, um, Demon the Fallen. Did I say Vampire? I think I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like
It's a way
3
harder question
other-
than we thought it was.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, let's see. Yeah, I can't even remember the other World of Darkness systems. But let's see. Then there was it Death Watchers? That's a system I'm sure you're not familiar with.
Nope. I haven't heard half of these. I don't think. I never heard of
I
them.
recognize World of Darkness. I didn't
Yeah.
realize how many different varieties of it there were.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
in your massive experience, obviously, what is your opinion on 5e, and what is your opinion on tabletop role playing in its current form? Because like with the pandemic and with the rise in Zoom communication, um, what is you have you seen change, and what are some trends that you find objectionable or trends that you find awesome in the hobby?
So, the fact that role playing games have become so much more prevalent is fantastic. Um, the idea that so many more people are not so much becoming familiar, but becoming aware of the hobby.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's great just to get that exposure. Because, like I was saying earlier, I mean, there's a stigma around role playing games.
Yeah.
And to be able to, I mean, you're never going to do away with that.
Right.
But you, to be able to at least alleviate some of that stigma is awesome. That said,
Cracks knuckles.
the problem is a lot of the exposure that the hobby is getting is from people that are so good at DMing and
Right.
voice acting and being a player. For a lot of people who are new to the hobby, when they get into these games with less experienced people, their expectation is so high
Right.
that when they don't get what they're expecting, it's just this immediate disinterest or
Disillusionment almost.
disillusionment.
Yeah.
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 And I hate to use the term, but it has become kind of an industry standard at this point. The Matt
Right.
Mercer effect.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was just
We've
gonna say.
talked
It's
about it on this show
that
before.
concept
Yeah.
of
Okay.
Yep.
there's
Yep.
nothing, nothing you can do except for people who that's their first exposure is Critical Role or some similar
Right.
like stacked cast of professional voice actors doing a podcast
Yeah.
replay. It's like, well, you know, those people, that's their day job. Like that's what they get paid to do. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's not just a casual time passing, like we're just all here to have fun kind of thing for
Right.
them. It's like they're making a living off of that.
Your
So it's
DM
not
is not doing this
different
as a
standard.
hobby, or your DM is
Yeah.
doing this as a hobby on
Right, yeah.
on his free time. He's not a professional, voice actor sitting down
Yeah.
and playing and planning for 8 hours a day. They don't
So-
he doesn't have an art studio behind him with a bunch of artists that'll crank out things that he can use, or the templates and battle maps and
production
things
budget
like that. Yeah,
or-
production
yeah.
budget, any production budget whatsoever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I spent $4 on some Roll20 assets. Yeah, that's what you're getting.
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a something that I think that a lot of people kind of experience in role playing more so than other hobbies, because it's not like you sit down and you watch a basketball game. You're not gonna like expect to jump on the court and do what you're watching these basketball players do. And I kind of think that people have an unreasonable expectation of what like role playing really is when they watch those produced shows, because that's brand new to the hobby. It's not something that has been around for most of the hobby's history. Is like
Yeah.
the role playing campaigns as shows or as products. And role playing campaigns for most of role playing's history were done in a private setting with just a group of 5 or 6 people, and those are the only people that are ever going to see what happened live at that moment. Whereas, now, even us, we stream campaigns, so they're like watched by people, and that's something that is brand new to a hobby that was famously done by antisocial people.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Absolutely.
it's interesting to, especially for me. Like, I mean, I don't nearly have your experience, but I've seen that kind of shift between people that join campaigns expecting to have a good time with like their four friends in a basement versus people that join campaigns, especially join campaigns online, with the expectation of being like an actor in a movie, or like you watch the Critical Role and you're like, oh, that looks so much fun, I want to be on that set. And then you go find some guy on Roll 20 and you're like, can you bring that experience to me? And 9 times out of 10 they're not going to be able to do that. And so,
Yeah.
what do you have any suggestions for either DMs looking to kind of combat that, or role players looking like with unreasonable expectations?
Honestly, I mean, it comes down to pick your DM and pick your players. Um, you guys had a like mini series with another guest recently where the guy was talking about how to choose or filter, who which kind of games to look for, which kind of players to look
Yeah.
for. I don't remember who that guy was, but
That's Majano. There are
Yep.
break videos. I think you're talking about the
yeah,
short
yeah,
Yep.
orders. Yeah.
Yeah, where I'm
yeah.
playing the new one here in 4 minutes when we go on break. So, yep.
But yeah, I mean, being aware of your own limitations is kind of the biggest thing that you as a player and you as a DM can give to your game. Because if you as a DM have these lofty, expectations, I can do this, when really, you're down here, that's a disservice to your players.
Yeah.
And it's a disservice to yourself. Similarly, as a player, if you have these lofty expectations of your GM, you know, you're screwing yourself over as much as yourself, because you're not going to have as much fun as if you just allow the game to evolve naturally.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. So, like, kind of to summarize what you've been saying is that in order to get a really good experience out of this hobby, you really do have to be kind of picky with the people that you experience this hobby with, because if you go in with strangers with unrealistic expectations, you're going to be constantly disappointed and probably not have as much fun as if you went in with the intent of experiencing it rather than having some kind of expectations going in that are at that level of production value. Just
Yeah.
expect to get into a voice chat with some people that are going to speak in goofy words, and a DM that's going to barely hold the whole thing together through the entire session. If you have that, if that's what you're going to go for, anything above that is going to be awesome. That's going to
Yep.
be why you're in it, is to get through those little frustrating parts where you spend 45 minutes discussing how you're going to infiltrate a bar, just for those moments where the character just rolls a 15 and you get the name on the list. I think that
Yep.
Yeah.
that's why we do it. All right.
Absolutely.
Well, it is just about 11:15, so we are going to take our 15-minute break and come back for our last half hour. Thank you, G, for being on here, and thank you guys for watching. We will be back in about 15 minutes, so stay tuned.
Cool.
And
So you did mention theater of the mind versus always having maps out. And
Yeah.
that's another thing. Not every DM is either willing or able to do a full theater of the mind combat system. And not every player is going to be okay with that. Some people want to see the actual layout. They want to see the images. They want to see the map. They want to see the distance. They want it all, particularly plotted, which is not a bad thing. You do need to know beforehand whether your DM is going to be doing that or not.
As a DM, I rarely map unless it's combat, but frequently combat's just a grid so that everybody knows how far away they are from everything. Though for me, because it's just easier to keep everything straight, I think. As a player, I find it very difficult to, especially with the way combat and most of the abilities are structured in D&D, it's pretty hard to feel like I'm keeping track of exactly what all's happening and going on, and how close am I to this person in relation to this person, and stuff like that can matter pretty quickly sometimes, in some, depending on your campaign. But there are ways to run combat that totally don't rely on those kind of specific distinctions. You can kind of just do the bands, range bands of combat or something that they've introduced into these other systems that take away the specific what square am I questions. And yeah, that's a big difference in play, and how the spells and abilities your characters have translate into what you can kind of do during the combat, or during outside of combat, stuff like that.
Welcome to Big Seeds General Store. We have the largest selection of fantasy-based items on this side of the Greater Dandaris River. Why don't we go inside and check out what I have for sale? Let's go. We are now inside Big Seeds General Store. Let's see what I have for sale. Well, this sure looks like a fine selection. We have bananas, onions, dragon eggs, pajama pants, occult statues, daggers, dangerous animals, socks, small figurines, real fake daggers, diplomas, drink koozies, hammers, potatoes. Well, that's just a small bit of our inventory. So you should do yourself a favor and come on down to Big Seeds General Store, where we will treat you like you want to be treated.
Step one of putting together a group or finding a group is time frame. It's scheduling.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
before you can even look at a DM's preferences or style, or players' tendencies, styles, preferences, before you can look at any of that, you have to look at scheduling. Because even though you might find a DM that runs a really good game that you really want to be a part of, if you can't make the times, if you can't be a part of their schedule, it's not worth trying to force it, because you're
Right.
going to end up missing. You're going to have players that are going to end up missing.
Yeah,
So scheduling, you have to be able to make the appointed times.
definitely.
Everyone does.
Right. I guess the best group in the world is not a group if they're not able to come together and get around a table and play the game, I suppose. Yeah, obviously the particulars of that are going to vary for everybody, but do you feel like There are any sort of tools, tips, or cheat codes to getting a scheduling to work?
The very first thing you have to do is everybody has to understand their own limitations.
Right.
You need to sit down and write it down. Write down when are your guaranteed days. You write it down so you don't have to think about it. Figure out, go through your week, go through your month, write it down, put it on a notepad. Just know your own availability so that you know where to look.
I think that seems like a really simple thing, I think, to a lot of people, but that's key, is like, know your damn schedule.
And you think it's easy enough to recall your schedule, but when you're put on the spot, you're gonna sit there and try to go through, do I have anything on this day? Do I have anything on this day? Just go through it ahead of time and write it down so you can say, yeah, I know it. It's right here.
I agree. That's a good idea. I lean toward, I have a Google Calendar, which is what I use to keep like everything in my life that is organized. Do you have any favorite tools to use, programs, things of that nature?
Now, personally, my schedule's always been pretty easy to work around. It's a set schedule, so I mean, there may be some better tools. Like if you look at it, you can make a chart off of like Google Documents or something like that. And which is what I used in my questionnaire. That's like the first thing that I had. It's basically just a series of rows and columns with little check boxes, different times of the day, different days of the week. Check the ones that you can be a part of,
right? That
you can be a part of. And that's the best thing for it. If you're looking for a DM or if you're looking for players, if you can get the most information about time frame and availability, and you can line people up with what matches, that's the easiest thing. And it's a really cool tool that I used, and it was on Google Documents. It's pretty easy to use. It lets you put in however many rows, however many columns, and it just puts little check boxes there. And all you got to do is just click on all the ones that are applicable. Now, obviously, life happens.
Right.
But you need to know what, 90% of the time or more, this day, this time slot, this is when I can make these games. And then you need to look for DM that's running a game in that time slot. If they're not in one of your time slots, move on.
Attention! If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with lycanthropy, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Lycanthropy is a rare, uncontrolled animalis transformation linked with monster bite exposure. Exposure to monster bites in the mercenary, adventuring, questing, or mortuary industries may put you at risk. Please don't wait. Raven 1-800-99-RAR-RNG for a free legal consultation and a financial information scroll. Lycanthropy patients send a Raven now. 1-800-RAR-RNG.
Hello, it is Irrational Radio. We are here with another Old for Gold episode. Smart like a fox. Foxes don't know alphabets.
Well, I can do some quick and dirties. I can just remove the toilet entirely and you can just shit down the hole.
I have a deadbeat brother who is still sleeping on my beanbag, and I need him to leave before my wife's sister's wedding.
Did you say in your beanbag?
Yes, he's been crashing on my living room beanbag for a long time.
He has a beanbag.
All right. Well, I'll make sure I let you know when I forward all of your orders into one of the sections.
This is the most ridiculous situation.
You were making it this whole way through like that wasn't a totally ridiculous idea until you had to say, and I will pour your food into the giant trough which you will retrieve it from.
Create something.
or assuming scheduling's out of the way, I guess, and that you've got whatever handful of people, prospective players.
Yeah.
How do you shorten the list beyond that? I guess what's your next step, I suppose.
Okay, from a DM standpoint, you need to know first off what kind of game you want to run.
Sure.
There are a lot of different types of games. There's a lot of different types of players. There's a lot of different types of DMs. First thing you need to know is what type of game you want to play. And then you need to ask your prospective players that match your time slot. Only those. Don't talk to anybody that doesn't match your time slot.
Right.
The players that match your time slot, you need to start asking them specific questions so that you know that they are on board and they're willing to play the type of game that you want to run. You find out what kind of game you want to run, and you need to come up with some questions. My method was a form on Google, a questionnaire with multiple choice answers, so you don't make them think too much. Show them some answers. And what you need to do is give them multiple choice, ask them the questions, let them answer, look at the documents. You're going to have some answers in there that, hey, if they choose this one, that player's probably not for my group, not the type of game that I want to run. And that's the way that I found to be the most successful. Multiple choice questions and answers. And you need red flag. I say red flag, not like they're bad things. It's just if they answer a certain way, they're probably going to be, a pretty good opposition to your style.
Could you give an example of one of these questions and how you might, tailor it to have one of these red flag answers that you could key on?
I wanted 5 players in my game. I wanted 4 of them to be either brand new or very inexperienced. So, with that type of game, some of my questions that I would have asked, obviously, is how much experience do you have?
Right.
I'm only looking for one experienced player. I wanted to bring new people into the game. So I look at experience. I grab all the people that match the time slot, and I grab all the people that have little to no experience. And then I'll grab a few to look at from the experienced pool. And then the next thing is an example of sort of your style is the combat to role play ratio. If you're wanting to run a balanced game, then you would have a question somewhere along the lines. What should the balance of role play and combat be like in your game? A few examples, role playing is what I live for, and if I can avoid combat, I will. All the way down the spectrum to combat is what I live for, and role playing, I'd rather not do it.
Yeah.
And then mix it up along the way. Whereas if you're wanting to run a role play centric game and somebody clicks that they don't want to participate in role play, they just want combat, get rid of that player.
Right.
Nothing against that player, but they're not a match.
Yeah.
And that will be a problem in the future if you grab that player.
Because DMs are players too. They don't get talked about like that.
Yeah.
They're supposed to enjoy themselves a bit as well and be doing the stuff that is fun for them. In the process of providing a fun and enjoyable game for everybody else too. So yeah, it's like, oh well, I'm the DM, I'll make it work. If you want that, I'll find a way to put it in there. But it's like, if I don't want to put, make sure that there's a combat session or a combat encounter in every session, then if you want that as a player, I'm sorry, you're not gonna want me as your DM. Like that's not gonna go well.
There may be DMs out there that can run every type of game really well for the players. If I don't know that there are, because I'm not one of them.
Right,
I can't do that. I have a style.
Yeah.
Most people have a style, and that's okay. It's better to send a player to another DM that will fit than it is trying to fit a player into your game that will not enjoy themselves or that will make other people not enjoy themselves. It's okay to tell somebody that you don't need to be a part of my game because of a style difference. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with their style or your style. It's just that if it doesn't match, it will cause problems. It's not about if, it will cause problems.
Hello, everybody. We're back. This is Table 13. We are here with our good friend G from the Irrational Radio server, as well as a few of his other projects that he is working on. We have asked a few people in the chat to provide us with questions, and we've gotten a couple. Some that G's already answered, but we've got one here that we'd like to talk about because it kind of goes into what we talked about with our last episode, and I would love to hear your opinion on it, G, because you were actually the person that asked the question that spawned the last episode that we did of Table 13. So
I was?
yes, yeah,
It was
you
either you or
asked it.
Bags. I don't remember.
It might have
Somebody
been-
posted
yeah.
it in there.
In the
but
Table
I think he
13
mentioned that
channel.
you said it first or
What
something.
was the question?
It was
How do you keep
exactly
attention?
what Goose's was how to keep attention in a group. I think, yeah, you posted it in the Table 13 chat, and yeah, so we thought that was such a good topic that we devoted a whole episode to it. But yeah, so what is your thoughts on that? You know, like, have you been involved in a group that was hard to keep attention focused, and how do you combat that?
Yes, I have had situations where it is hard to maintain focus. There have been some games that I have just scrapped the session because there has been so much loss of focus. Sometimes, considering the Pew Pew Anonymous stuff that I'm working on, it's a necessary evil. Not to get morbid, but one of the times was one of my players. He was one of his ex-soldiers had just killed himself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Makes for a
so
rough
that
game.
session became, we're not going to play today. We're going to devote this session to let's deal with this trauma.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But outside of that, I mean, sometimes scrapping a session is, while extreme, a necessary choice that you have to make. And that's just something that you have to decide as a GM. If there's just too much, if your players are not, there's a word I'm looking for here. If they're not going to give you the respect that you deserve as the GM,
Right.
then you have to deal with that in whatever ways that you can. Sometimes it's okay. You had your little chat. Let's get back to the game. Sometimes it's snarky remarks, not necessarily directed at you or a player, but I rolled a 43. It's the answer to life, the universe, and everything. It's not side chatter per se. It's just the snarky joke, and everybody moves on. But I mean, it's really situation dependent. I don't have a this is an answer to every situation answered for that.
Right. Yeah. We find that that's
Yeah, I get.
that. Oh yeah, go on, Eric. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I find the best thing that you can usually do is make sure that it's been brought up to their attention, that the person knows if it's become a pattern or whatever, that you've got like an issue where there's one person who's causing these disruptions, or if it's the whole group, you talk to everybody to say, hey, this is happening regular enough that it's like causing me grief. And if you can bring attention to it, a lot of people just didn't realize, and they'll do their best to fix that in the future. And if there's a solution, that's usually it. And if that doesn't work, there's not usually a lot that you can do otherwise. It seems, in my experience anyway, it's kind of like, well, if they don't respect you enough, you can't make them.
Right.
Not in a way that's fun, and not in a way that's functional at a D&D table anyway.
Yeah.
Or whatever kind of but so that's I think that's it is a really tough spot. There's not a lot of easy answers for those kinds of problems, but generally, just talk to them like they're adults, and hope that they respond like an adult.
Yeah.
That's my suggestion, I guess.
We didn't actually talk about scrapping sessions in our episode, and I think that's a really good tool in a DM's box to use if the situation requires it. Because I have seen DMs like basically fold themselves over backwards trying to get the players to role play, even if the role players are like, hey, I gotta pick up my sister, this is happening, 2 role players are gonna be late, and this, and the DM is like, oh, we can all meet.
We'll make
you
it
can
happen.
you can get on with your phone, like
Right.
when it's going to be like exponentially harder to keep their attention if all of that is going on, if you've got people jumping in and out. And I think that scrapping a session, it can be useful not only if your players are not showing you respect, but if it's just like, okay, I don't think that you guys are going to have the mental ability to take part in this hobby the way that it demands, and so we're just gonna hold off until next week. I see a lot of people kind of treat like sessions almost in I don't want to say holy, but like in a way that they must never be canceled, or they must never be scrapped. And I think that that's kind of a disservice to both the DM and the role players, because we're all adults here. We have outside lives, we have outside shit going on. And if you have a role player that's obviously not into it, like because something is going on, and maybe they're not like your role player, and they didn't tell you that this horrible thing had happened, and they were just there, and they were not responding, to like like, hey, what are you doing? Like, you've been quiet, you're just like here. And taking that time and taking that space to deal with those kinds of situations is important, I think. Not only for like the situation that you just described there, because it's something that we didn't go over, and I think that was a large oversight, is the ability to
Just some nights it's not. There are situations where there's other things that come up, and that's way more important than making sure that you get to kick down the next door or whatever. Progress your plot along and whatnot. Goose threw another question in here that's adjacent to some of the stuff that's in the break videos here. Do you find that you're more of a sandbox open world DM, or do you find that you're more of a kind of railroady directed plot? Railroad's one of those that gets bad word, I think. That's like a bad way to describe it to most people, but do you feel you have a more organized directed main plot, similar to how a lot of modules are built to function, or do you find yourself doing more of a just build the world and let the party run around in it?
So the Stars Without Number game, that currently has, I think, 70 planets, is completely open world. The players can go anywhere they want. Granted, it takes time to travel between worlds. There is an overarching plot that they're supposed to be dealing with. but only one of the players is actually trying to deal with that, and everyone else is, let's make money. So that, yeah, that's completely open world, and I just, all right, where are we going next?
Cool.
um, I have I've run one module in what I can remember of gaming. It was a module that a friend of mine had written for
Oh,
fourth
interesting.
edition. That campaign lasted, I think, 5 sessions, maybe 4 or 5. And no, okay, that's not entirely true. Okay. So that was, I'm going to say 10 years ago. Recently, my post-apocalypse game was based on a module that I basically redesigned and had everything go in reverse for the players. So while it was a module, it was highly modified. But yeah, for the most part, I don't do modules well. That said, I'm going to be starting a new campaign soon-ish. It's called Svyland.
Ooh.
It's based on 5e, but it's Vikings, and it's a whole rule set. And they are releasing a module with it next month,
Interesting.
April, sometime soon. My plan is that's going to be the start of the game, but I haven't read it yet, so I don't know how it's going to go.
Okay.
That's fun. I guess, yeah, Goose asked some further questions here.
He's killing it with those questions.
Yeah, he's got a few. I'll string through. I'll go to the most connected one next here is, I guess. So, how much do your players know about your worlds? Like, are they left in a lot of mystery about your setting, or is it something that's pretty well, is information pretty accessible as a general rule? Are the players like, are the characters pretty well educated on their surroundings and stuff like that?
For the
think that's about
sci-fi
it.
game, the players could be more educated if they how to phrase this so it makes sense. Characters can get information in game on the planets that they're approaching if they do a planetary survey, which would give the players information on the planets.
Right.
The player has to initiate the planetary survey to get said
Gotcha.
information. I think my players have done that once in
So
2 years.
they're not super. I guess they're not. Yeah, they're not scholars or whatever of your setting
Right.
by any stretch. It doesn't sound maybe.
They wing it.
Yeah. Hey, that works. That's fun.
Interesting. So I've got a question about your world building here in the last little bit here. So it starts with that number. You say that you've individual planets, and as well as like a star system map and systems that you've like filled with NPCs and things like that. How do you go about building a planet? What are kind of the steps you take to invent a setting? And yeah, and just
So frankly, I cheated.
okay. All right. I mean, that's fine.
There's a website that you can go to. It's like Sectors Without Number or something,
Okay.
and it will build a um, an entire sector with the planets in each grid. Now that gives you a base. It takes the GM to flesh out each of those planets from the information that you're given.
Right.
Sure.
But it's like a randomly generated stack of information.
Okay.
But I have now taken like 70 planets worth of, this randomly generated stuff, and I know what's going on each of these planets.
That's really cool. That's important. That's a
A lot
neat
of moving
system.
parts.
Yeah, I don't think it's cheating necessarily.
No,
That's
yeah, if
like saying
generators are
that.
cheating, I cheat too.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, that's saying like, oh, I don't actually come up with names. I just use a name generator. But, I think that those are more like tools. Like, oh, I don't garden. I just use a spade. It doesn't make sense. So I think that those kinds of things are really important in a GM's toolbox. And I think that the thing that makes it okay, or I think the thing that makes it useful rather than just cheating or rather than just copy pasting is like how you describe the fleshing out as a DM.
Yeah.
That where you add your own detail, where you add your own like systems or logic to the information that has been generated for you. That's really where your job as a DM in the mechanical side of your like setting really comes
Yeah.
to bear. Um, and so no, I don't think that you're cheating at all. I think that is a very intelligent way of building a lot of things very very quickly, in a way that you're not sitting there and going like, okay, what is the atmosphere of this planet like? Because believe me, I've been there where I'm trying to describe every city in Paralandia, and once you've described 15 Arborian settlements, the 16th it's hard to make that feel different than the other 15. And if I had the ability to click make a town and then add my own detail to it without getting my pants suit off or something, I totally would do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a very intelligent way, and I don't think people should be as scared of especially those kinds of generators, because
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and when you're talking about that kind of bulk of setting to cover, especially in a space campaign where you've got like, okay, you need like a whole bunch on up each planet that they're going to visit, but you don't necessarily know which planet they're going to visit. I think that's
right.
like, a great way to be able to start with some basic information so that you're never going to have to start from zero.
Right.
But then the places they're going to visit regularly, or that you've got important stuff to direct them toward, that's occurring here, you can flesh those out more specifically.
Yeah.
And I think that's how that helps with the process of kind of like bringing that stuff to the table. In
Yeah.
my experience, anyway, it feels like. So I think it's a great great place to start, if nothing else. And then you can. That's the other thing. If you have a lot of other stuff about your system that you've already established, you can more easily fill in the gaps when you find yourself in other places. So I think that's like good strat.
Yeah.
Solid stuff.
Absolutely. So we're going to take the last 10 minutes here and kind of just let you have the stage. Yeah. So is there anything that you'd like to give a shout out to? Anything that you'd like to promote while you've got these fine folks sitting here, and while because this is going to go on YouTube in the future, and so if you want anybody in posterity to listen to a message, this is your time to send something to the future.
Yeah, I really.
Putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
No podcasts you want to plug, or any of the other things that you're a part of? We see you post occasionally in the Discord toward, or no? Is that I don't.
I'm really not involved in that much else. I mean the
Stream, I meant, not podcast.
the D&D game that I was streaming earlier. It's streamed on my channel. It's run by another guy.
What's
but
that called?
the Out of the Abyss.
Out of the Abyss for people,
Yeah.
just so people who are looking for it know how to find it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But yeah, it's on my YouTube. My Stars Without Number game, which is up to, I want to say, episode 78, something like that.
All right.
Nice.
That's nice. That's a
Yeah.
good solid number.
But yeah, it's on my YouTube. My World of Darkness game, that is again technically on hiatus, is on my YouTube channel. But someday I'd like to get back to that. That was something that I was enjoying. Everybody started out as just a plain old human, and they were all going to become something more.
That's cool.
And it was very Cthulhu-esque. So
yeah,
That's fun.
All right. And so if someone was interested in either joining the very beginning of Pew Pew Anonymous or like finding it once you have it created, what would be your suggestion for those people?
Eventually, it's going to be pewpewanonymous.com.
Okay.
Right now, that website is it's kind of a I'll say a joke website that one of my players put together for the Stars Without Number, the group that is mercenarying around.
Okay.
But eventually it's going to get switched over to the actual nonprofit.
Okay.
But
Cool.
yeah, so
All right. Well, maybe once you got that up and it's been on there, we'll get you back on the show, and you can kind of tell us how it's been running that, and you can peg it then too. So all right, guys. Well, this has been Table 13. Thank you, G, for coming on and talking to us.
My pleasure.
Really enjoyed your company and your perspective and your experience here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So this has been Table 13. We do this every Thursday at 10:30 at night, Central Standard Time, PM. Or PM CST. I don't know how that, it's time. We also have another stream on Mondays that airs at 9:30 CST at night, PM. And we also have a podcast that has been completed. You can find that wherever podcasts are sold, or stolen or listened to.
It's free.
It's free. You don't have to steal it. It's two complete seasons. It's a pretty interesting story arc of a bunch of ragtag people ending up owning their own country in Paralandia. So if you're interested, seeing how that all turns out, that is like I said on Podbean and iTunes and all that kind of stuff. And we have another podcast that is in the works towards the end of March that is going to continue that story with a little bit with a different cast of characters. So tune in then. You can find our merch store on irrationalradio.io, as well as links to our Discord at irrationalrad.io. Click below. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can click below if you're on YouTube too, because I put the link in there. Yeah. Click below. Buy a sweatshirt, buy a t-shirt. We have new t-shirts. I'm wearing one right now. Don't hate the player, hate the game master. So, you should check that out. I'll get that up on the store here in a few days. If you really like us and you want to donate to the cause and help make this stream better, you have helped us out a whole bunch. We've been able to buy new equipment. I've got a green screen behind me now because of you guys. It's awesome. If you're a fan of the show, you can throw us a couple of bucks and you'll get some perks back. We got some real cool perks on there, like free t-shirts, drawings, maps, that kind of stuff. So thank you again, everybody, for tuning in, and we will see you all next week. Goodbye.
Boy.